So Dayna, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this interview with us. I first met you, it's about 10 years ago, I think, or more. I didn't actually look at the date, when I drove 2,100 kilometres to an unschooling camp that you were going to be at. And that was the most exciting part for me, because I had read your book, Radical Unschooling, and I was just starting out on that journey. Well, I'd been doing it a little while, and I was kind of thinking about all these different ways of our lifestyle, basically, because that's what we want to talk about today, is more like the lifestyle of it than the actual like schooling part. But yeah, to meet you after reading your book and being so inspired by you, you were like my permission slip to do a lot of the things that in my heart I wanted to do, but there was no one around me with your thought process. So you gave me permission to be as like the radical person I kind of wanted to be, which was really awesome. But also I've never kind of been really public about how different my lifestyle is. So I'm very grateful that you get out and share this message with people, because I think it's becoming more and more, people are becoming more and more hungry for this message. Do you think that's?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for 15 to 17 years, believe it or not. Yeah. And it's definitely growing. It's getting more accepted. I've noticed just from different spots and things I've done on television, that from the first interview I did on TV with Dr. Phil all the way to the last one with Jeff Probst, it went from completely thinking I'm crazy to him saying what an amazing, valid alternative this is, and everybody should be doing it. So I've seen it grow just in a 10-year, in a span of 10 years on television, but also just with the type of people that reach out to me. You know, in the beginning of my work, it was a lot of naturally minded moms, you know, like we are, just naturally minded moms that would have home birth and attachment parenting style moms, and dads. Now there's no box that anybody fits in. Everything from doctors and lawyers to child actors, parents reach out to me, to just everybody, the waitress next door, you know, the mom next door. Everybody wants to know about this life. So it's becoming more and more accepted in the mainstream, which I think is really wonderful. So that means that children's rights are being more noticeably respected. And that to me is that the heart of everything I do is children's rights.
Yeah, I just got goosebumps as you said that. Just got goosebumps. Yeah.
So the evolution of human consciousness and the rights of human beings have been an evolutionary thing, and it's time for children. So that's what I'm seeing more than anything, are people really realizing that children are very discriminated against in our culture. And I'm proud to be a voice, along with you ladies, being voices to say that children's needs matter too, and we need to bring more awareness to that.
Yeah. Can you tell us what day-to-day life looks like? Like, what is this lifestyle?
So a day-to-day life for me looks, well, you know, I do a lot with our family. So we're traveling a lot. So a lot of our things are centered around personal things that we do. Like we tour and we speak all over the world. So for me, a lot of what I do is kind of centered around that in the morning. But helping facilitate the kids' interest in their learning is really important. So my daughter Ivy loves animals, and she volunteers at a local animal shelter. So that's something that we do regularly, is bring her to the animal shelter. And interestingly enough, the people that work there are always so surprised that with her free time, and her life is her free time, she wants to spend it volunteering at an animal shelter. So, and plus the way she looks, you know, she's I don't know if anyone's familiar with my daughter Ivy, but she's very wild looking. She has piercings and her hair's red, and she looks like somebody in the mainstream would think she looks like a bad, wild kid, but they're so surprised that this incredibly wild looking child is the sweetest, most loving human being. And it really kind of blows a lot of stereotypes out of the water for not only unschoolers, but somebody that looks like her. Yeah, and Tiffany, my daughter Tiffany, is just got a job at a restaurant. So she's a model. She does that kind of on the side, and she's a YouTuber, but she wanted to try working in a restaurant to make some extra money. And so she starts this job on a Saturday. She's very excited. So we went shopping for her new clothes. I mean, I'm just sharing like what today was like, but on a typical day, my kids just live life like most kids do on the weekend. And I've never lived anything differently. So for me, we've never done anything different from day one with my children. This is all we've done. So I don't really have anything to compare it to. So when somebody asks me that question, it's kind of, it's interesting because I think they're probably looking for ways in which our life is different from mainstream, but because we've never lived mainstream, I don't know how weird this sounds to anybody. I'm just sharing what we do. Ivy and I cook together a lot. So she makes dinner actually almost every night now, which is really amazing and so nice. She loves to cook. Every night she makes dinner at this stage of her life at age 14.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful for people to hear that children actually left to their own free will and free choice make awesome choices for themselves.
They do, and they want to be productive, and they want to achieve, and they want to grow as people. They don't compare themselves to other people, which is really nice, but they really do cultivate and ask me to facilitate and support them in different things that they're doing. So Ivy, well, it's just interesting because most people might not value this, but Ivy's really, really into concerts right now. I'm going and learning about the history of heavy metal and how it all started. And we went to this nightclub the other night. It was an all ages show with death metal bands. And I was teaching her about the whole culture of like slam dancing and the mosh pits, how they started. And we talked about all the history in England, how everything started there. And so it turned into this amazing history lesson. Some people might not value rock and roll being history, but it really is. It's a really important part of history at the time when it happened. So we had deep conversations. I showed her how to protect herself in the mosh pit. I showed her, like really, we did. And I showed her how you always need to be watching it and look how everybody's moving in one direction. And when you see somebody coming, you need to always turn your back and stand behind the biggest guy you can find. And so it was like this amazing mother-daughter moment of connection where she learned a lot about me, who I was as a teen. She learned a lot about safety in these situations. She learned a lot about history. We talked about, so it was just the most wonderful night with her. On the surface, it may look like it was just this crazy, wild, pointless thing, but it ended up being like one of the most powerful evenings I ever had with my daughter, where we connected and I educated her about a lot. I shared a lot with her. And so the same thing is true with all my kids. When these organic moments come up based around what they love, just discussing things and sharing with them truthfully and authentically, I just love it. It's really, really a beautiful life. So yeah.
How did you come to choose this way of life? Were you brought up like this and you just continued it on?
No, I was not brought up like this. I was brought up really traditionally, and I went to school and I got good grades for the most part. And then when I hit junior high and high school, no, I didn't really want to have anything to do with it. It felt really unjust. And I did okay. I graduated and it was fine, but it was just, it started to not make sense for me. I didn't really understand why I had to be doing this all day, every day, when I had so many dreams and things I wanted to do myself. You know, I wanted to do so much of my time, and instead my entire childhood and teen years were filled with living somebody else's agenda. So I thought a lot about that when I was a teen. I really did. I used to write about it. I'd think about it. I listened to bands that would talk about it. Like I was a real metalhead, as you might have guessed, talking to you about Ivy. I was categorized as like a really bad kid because I liked heavy metal and the way I dressed. But it was bands like,
Jo's a heavy metal fan.
Yeah. Well, it was bands like Metallica that kind of really got me thinking about children's rights. They have an album called Injustice for All, and the whole album is really about parenting and how children are treated and disrespect. And it was the first time anyone ever spoke to me like that and really understood me. I remember loving them because I said, they get it. And so that stuck with me. And I always say my first step into this work was when I was 14, listening to Metallica and all the way up. And I don't really listen to them very much now. Like I think I'm more into like mellower music now, but I can appreciate that still in the journey of my own life. And I actually had front row for Metallica last year for my birthday as a gift from a friend. So it was like this beautiful moment where when I saw them and I'm hearing them sing and I'm just remembering and how much I owed them for this journey. So that's just one little piece of how I came to do what I'm doing. And so I want parents that are listening to value what your children are into, because nobody valued the fact that I listened to Metallica. I had my Metallica albums thrown away by parents and uncles, different people I lived with when I was growing up. I had my clothes cut up, Metallica shirts ripped, for example, saying I looked terrible wearing this, when in fact, nobody knew that they would be the most powerful force in me bringing peace into the world.
Wow.
And so it's really, really important for parents to really understand that what your children are interested in, whether it's a video game that you think is violent or no matter what it is, to trust them and trust the process, because your children's interests and passion, they're an extension of who they are. And so when you're judging that as bad or trash or not worthy, your children internalize it just like I did. And they think that they're bad and that there's something wrong with them if my parents don't value something that I'm just so drawn to and I love so much. So that's another big piece to this philosophy that I'm sure we could go more into is.
Definitely, we really want to.
Yeah. So, and it's hard. The hard thing sometimes, even now, is it's easy for me to support Ivy's interests because she's into heavy metal, and I totally get that. My daughter Tiffany, who's 17, on the other hand, is into different kind of music that challenges me. She's into a lot of like kind of rap that's like really sexual, the lyrics. And so for me, that's my trigger. Where when I was younger, and it was like about when it was Slayer or Metallica, those lyrics were really a trigger for my parents. And when I lived with my uncle and aunt for a couple of years during like a really rough time in my life. So I'm referring to both. And so when I'm triggered, I just talk about it. I don't tell her what she's listening to is bad. I just say, well, oh, wow. So he said in that song, he wants to do that to her. So what do you think about that? And so we talk about that and I say, wow, that's like really triggering. It feels really, like women are really objectified. And how do I try not to judge it. And she's like, well, yeah, it's like that. But the songs like that they're all like that. You kind of have to ignore that, she says. I love the beat of the song and I love this band. You just ignore the stuff that's just yuck. And I remember thinking that back when I was listening to like Slayer, they had some satanic-y lyrics that I remember I didn't just ignore it, but I love the music. I didn't internalize it. So again, I really try to draw from my own upbringing and my own experience as a wild teen, and talk to my kids about it. So if your children are playing a game or listening to something that's triggering you, just tell them.
Yeah, I love that. And you're answering our questions.
You've got to hide the triggers and just the attack. Well, that's what I did.
Yeah.
So when you are triggered, I love that you can talk to them and use those words and say what's going on for you. But what do you do with that? Like if you walk away from a conversation with your kids and you are feeling triggered, do you have tools to work on yourself?
Well, when I'm feeling triggered, I tell them I am. So we talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think because
they understand the concept, of course.
They do. Well, and they're so sick of me saying the word triggered, actually. They tease me about it.
Will laugh at that
they tease me about it. I know.
My daughter just said to me yesterday, I'm really triggered by that word triggered.
Well, my kids are like, okay, how does that trigger you, Mom? Like, or something like that. So it's fun. We have fun, but
yeah.
So we'll talk about it. Like that example that it happened yesterday, and I love a lot of Tiffany's music, but sometimes I just can't even believe that people sing about what they do now. I mean, like I cannot. Like I listen to the worst of the worst, and no, it's way worse now, just sexually, and I'm like, wow, guys, and the girls will be laughing, and Tiffany will say, listen to this again, listen to what he says. And she'll play the same thing to me for me to hear it because she thinks it's mind-blowing too. And I'm sitting in total discomfort going, oh my God, I could have never listened to this with my mother. And I'm like, here we are. I'm the one that is uncomfortable. I need to make peace with this. And I do. I move through it and say, wow, that's insane. And so, but I don't tell them not to listen to it. I think if you realize that, I think we envision as parents, you're welcome. I think we envision as parents that when our kids hear this, that they're going to do it, or that they think it's okay, or that it's going to be a bad influence. And that's really just what we think. That's not reality.
I often tell parents this story of one of my friend's children. And when he was, he kept getting in trouble at school for playing war games. Mm-hmm. And anyway, when his mum came home, and she was pretty open to this, and she had me as a friend, so she kind of would hear different perspectives all the time or whatever. And she came home and she asked him about what he was doing, and I thought he made said the wisest thing to her that he could say when she asked him about playing war games. He said, doesn't the teacher realize it's pretend?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing with music and
Yeah, because he knew the difference.
Right.
And he knew to not kind of hurt the children. They were both interacting where it was fun. It wasn't like one child was being hurt and the other one. They were both having a great time playing the game. So they understood the rules of the game. You know, so I often tell that story to people, and it helps people to understand that, they can pretend. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think a lot of it, for me, comes into voluntary interactions. If two people want to be doing something, just because somebody else might judge it, it's their choice and their freedom, and no one's being forced to do anything against their will.
Yeah.
Now that can be really triggering.
Yeah. It's not.
Right.
There's no problem. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes too, we think that our kids constantly need these lessons and reinforcement and reminders about values that they just have instilled already. You know, values and morals, we're born being good people. We come into this world wanting to do good with good intentions. And the only time people have like really developed these things, bad morals or bad values, and treat people badly, is if they were treated that way themselves. So much of the time I'll say something to the girls, and this isn't all the time, it's just every once in a while when I hear a new song that really is interesting. They'll be like, Mom, we know that that's not something to do. Hello, we're 14 and 17. You don't need to remind us that it's not okay to do that or whatever. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I want to make sure, and I'll be vulnerable. I'll be like, you know what? I just want to make sure I'm being a good mom. And I've like told you everything that you should know. It's just my own triggering that, oh my gosh, I got to make sure that as a mom, I communicate this to them, and they laugh. And so, you know, for me over the years, I've learned that honesty and vulnerability is one of the most important things on this path, because when we tell our kids what our needs are and what our fears are, they can communicate to us and help reassure us that everything's okay. And I think a lot of parents don't think that that's okay to do to children, to put them in that position. But these are relationships that are in partnership. And the only way our kids will learn to be honest and really get in touch with their feelings is if we can, even the hard, difficult emotions that we face. So I might say something like, I'm trying to think, a couple of years back, when Devin was little. He's 19 now, and he's a computer game coder, and so thank goodness I never limited him with video games, because now that's his living. But you know, there was a time when he was playing like Grand Theft Auto, which is a really controversial game, you know, super controversial, and he was explaining to me why he liked it, and I just said to him, I really had to dig into my fear when he first started playing it, and reach down and say, what am I afraid of? Because every time we want to control our children, it's because we're fearful about something. So I think that's really helpful for parents when they feel like controlling, to trace the fear back and then really face it. So I said to him, I'm afraid you're going to go out and shoot people and steal cars if you watch this. And he just started laughing. And I'm just like, I just have to be honest. This is my fear. Please reassure me that this game is not training you to shoot people and go steal cars. He just starts laughing. He's like, oh my gosh, Ma, are you serious? And I'm like, I just need reassurance that that's not happening. And I'm sure it's not. But he's just like, Mom, this is a game. It's okay. Just don't worry.
So pretend. This is pretend.
Yeah, right. He's
yeah.
But in the beginning, I just had to say it, because that was that's our fear, right? That's our fear. And I think a lot of parents are so afraid to do that, because, and not even that they're afraid, but they're not in touch with those fears. They're not in touch with those emotions. So,
can we dive into that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
we were reading some of your blog, one of your awesome blog posts, and can we read some of it out to you, so you can kind of
please do
talk a bit about this thing of how parents, like, we've got to dive into our fear, but often we don't even know how to do that, or that so used to avoiding it.
These few sentences really resonated with us. When a human being is controlled, unable to live life on their own terms, the innate desire for freedom overrides all else, and the only way to have needs met as children was to learn to lie, cheat, and manipulate, because more direct ways of communicating our needs and our pleas to be heard were ignored, and often we were punished for even having them.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, like, that triggers me. I mean, oh my gosh, here I go. Ignore my word trigger. That It's just a buzzword now.
That's
It's
your
so
blog.
trendy.
That's
I
your
put my own blog and I'm triggered.
yeah, yeah.
You know, what it does is I wouldn't say it triggers me, but it reminds me, it takes me back to feeling that way.
Yeah.
And that's why what's so important to me when I write is tapping into that, which is not easy. You know, my blog entries, especially lately, you know, the last couple of years have been really different because I've really learned to tune in to my feelings and remember and almost meditate before I write so I can reach back and feel like I did when I was a child. Now I feel like that's one of the only ways we can help people is because we need to be in their position. We need to be in children's positions to be able to feel how we felt. So much of that blog in particular was just sitting there remembering being a child and being so misunderstood, you know, and remembering that I did not want to cheat, I did not want to steal, and I did not want to lie, but I was conditioned to do so to the point where I deal with it today. Really, I read the book, or I'm reading the book, Radical Honesty, because there were aspects of my life in which I wasn't honest that I've affected a lot in a negative way. And with relationships and not even just blatant lies, but just things that where I wasn't in tune enough with myself about to be honest about. So my needs, I'm really good at meeting other people's needs and facilitating that. And I'm good at meeting my own basic needs, you know, basic food, exercise, yoga. But as far as my emotional needs, that's like another whole thing that I'm really learning about now. So yeah, that's the further we go down this path, as you ladies know, we're never done. We're never done.
Yeah.
We think that
you might chuff off to the fifth dimension if you're done, but it's probably not coming up soon.
No, and I think it's moms like us who are on this journey, parents like us that are on this journey where we're really on a path of self-discovery and doing something different and wanting more freedom in our own lives, because we've been doing it for a long time with our kids, and where else can we get more freedom, and where else can I heal? Because hopefully our children will not have anywhere near the issues and problems we have.
Hopefully.
I hope they will not, but it's not perfect because they have us as parents and we were raised that way. So our kids are going to have issues because of us, because of that.
Yeah.
And so
we'll send them back to this interview if they do.
Yeah. Well, I see ways in which my own upbringing, you know, the way I was treated as a child affects everything. How you're raised as a child affects everything. Including relationships that I deal with now, and situations that I put myself in now, and the inability to, you know, really tap into what I really want in a situation because I want to make other people happy, and I want to please people, and I want people to accept me. Still, like, I am so not at the place yet where I'm just like,
yeah,
F everybody, like, you know. Because I love people deeply and I care deeply about others' welfare, being very empathetic. And so that's an added challenge for a lot of us, I think, is dealing with that. So I'm glad you liked that blog entry. It really put me off on a tangent, as you can hear, just from my own one sentence.
And I imagine it's challenging. Well, it's challenging for us at this point to step into what we truly believe in and what we value in life. When criticisms start to come in, the more you put yourself out there, the more people know about your way of life, your opinions, and they begin to challenge you.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I think I'm finally used to that part after 20 years. You don't have long to wait. Don't worry. I think.
It's almost like I wish I'd come to some of this work where I was I've dealt with my own emotional stuff in the last 5 years, really, like being able to you know, use tools and that. And I've learned tools myself to help other people, but I wished I'd had those more earlier on. That's when I really needed them. I've only come to this very, very much now. I mean, I knew I was doing so many things I didn't want to do. I just didn't really, again, know how to actually look at my own emotions. And maybe I just didn't want to. It was too scary. So so I just never came across things that would lead me that way, because I was just avoid. And I think that's what everyone, you can understand why people do that.
Definitely. And I think a lot of us really, you know, I shouldn't speak for other people, but for me, I wanted to give my kids the best life that I knew how to. But a lot of the decisions I think I made a lot of years ago would put like my ideal of what I thought that looked like before what was maybe best for me or the kids.
Oh, I did that too.
And so like I have this vision, and I'm going to give you a really a big example that I've only shared on one other interview ever. And so this is like a big part of my life, and it's been a year, so this might be shocking to some people, but Joe and I, my husband, split up a year ago. Now I want to share about that because there's a reason why this is so important to be honest with people about. So, and we're living together still. We had a conscious uncoupling. We're living together, like really happily in peace, raising the kids together. And it's just amazing. And I never would have imagined that could happen. But so, early on, I didn't expect to become an advocate at this. I was just living my life with my kids, doing what felt right to me. I didn't really have anyone as a mentor. I just kept going on instinct. And we had more and more kids, and life rolled on. And, I was never really in love, but I loved him. And I was with him since I was 15. And he had his issues with anger and just stuff that he dealt with that really hurt me. But the more known I became, the more people knew who I was. Even though I was unhappy in a marriage, I was like, I can't divorce. Like, because what is that saying about the philosophy? And what are my kids, like, I don't want to split my kids up. My goal was to like live the most perfect life with them, where we had an intact family and they had everything I didn't have, and so I pushed through it, man. It was a lot of hard years for he and I. We went through issues with drinking for a couple of years. This was, many years ago. We dealt with a lot, all because I wasn't honest. All because I wasn't honest out of fear that my children would have a bad life as a result. And I was willing to sacrifice it. I'm like, I don't need love. I mean, I have a roof over my head, I have the kids, but over time that became so big and it caused so many problems that I just couldn't do it anymore. So for me as a woman and the expectations I had for my life and my kids, especially being this like pioneer, this unschooling person, I have to live a certain way. I kept myself in this space and I just became progressively more and more unhappy, which caused more and more dysfunction. So it was a year ago that I was just I had nothing to lose. And I just told him outright, like to his face, after reading the book, Radical Honesty. That book really is a lifesaver. And just telling him outright how I felt. And it was really, really hard, but we're all so much better as a family now because I didn't know it, but the kids they saw me being kind of mistreated. They saw me crying in the bathroom when I didn't think they saw me. Your kids aren't stupid. They see it all. And I was modeling for them to stay in an unhappy marriage for the sake of an image or for the sake of not wanting to be a failure, And so that's really important to me to tell people now because I wasn't ever intentionally manipulative or wanting to just show something to the world, but I was fearful of this philosophy being judged because I wasn't married, So in time, you just have to hit a point where the only thing that matters now is truth. That's it. That's it, truth. And
which is so it's so like this is what we understand for our children as well. Like we understand that we want them to follow their inner guidance, that we want to follow what feels good for them because of our own conditioning. It's harder for us to do it than it is for them to do it, which
definitely
is I'm so thankful for that. But but I can totally understand why something like that would have been extremely difficult for you. I mean, I've only just got to the point where I can share anything about my life in a public forum. So
I'm sharing more now. Like I'm not. And there's times where I look back, I didn't realize that I was in that state, really. I knew I was kind of unhappy, but a lot of times I blame myself, or I would make excuses for him because he has anger issues. And I think I just had to, in order to continue it to evolve as a woman and to continue to model that to my girls, I needed to do the hardest thing that I've ever done. And in turn, things are awkward sometimes living in the same house with your ex-partner, but we're paving the way with that. I mean, like we're literally, we have been separated a year and we co-parent and we share a home. And sometimes we say to each other, like, are we really doing this? This is so weird and so cool, like that we can finally live honestly. So my daughter, there's been times where they've been sad about the separation, but my daughter Tiffany said to me the other day, she hasn't really talked about it a lot lately, but she was getting teary and she said, I miss our road trips and I miss when we were together as a family. But I would never want you to go back to as unhappy as I saw you then. You know, I remember how unhappy you were. And so I know this is the best thing, but it's hard. And I was really quick to want to feel comfortable in that situation. I felt so guilty, and I felt like my impulse was to be like, oh, it's okay, Tiffany. But I instead just did what I did when she was a baby. And what I'm going to share here is really interesting, because when my kids were babies and I was holding them, and they had nursed and they had a clean diaper, but they were crying, you know, and I would try to offer the breast again, and they just didn't take it. I would just hold them and just embrace it and let them cry. So just let it out, sweetie, I'm here. You know, I wouldn't try to stifle it. So I felt like a better mom because a baby wasn't crying, or like I just really allowed it. And so it was in that moment, the most painful thing is to allow me to feel the result of something I've done, you know, like that didn't come clean sooner with my partner, that I wasn't in love, you know, or that I made mistakes. And so seeing Tiffany sit there and start to cry, just like I just held her and just said, it's okay, sweetie. I know it hurts me too. I didn't take on that pain that it was my fault. It just was what was, you know, like it just, and I said, I'm sad too, like about it. This is not how I pictured my life either. But here we are, and we're doing okay. You know, we're alive, and we're helping a lot of people by sharing this kind of truth, because I think it's kind of an issue with a lot of us leading this peaceful parenting life, because we feel that, you know, we don't.
Humans, I think.
Yes, exactly. And so, it's everything's fine now. I mean, we have more to. Can't imagine living here forever. There's going to come a time where we will both go our own separate ways physically, but for now, it's just working for us. So if anyone wants to know more about conscious uncoupling, I am really happy to help, because I don't know if I'm an expert, but after a year of us maintaining this, it's.
Yeah, and how has your relationship changed from that point of uncoupling?
Oh, we don't have sex anymore.
Yeah. I thought that might be the case, but
yeah. No, we're not in an intimate relationship whatsoever, or romantic. But I think it's actually funny, because it feels better than it did. See, for me, I'm like, it was my choice, so it's a lot different experience for me than it is for him. He went through a long, hard time of regret and suffering, but you know, I was by his side, and I would hug him through it and just told him I understood. And so our relationship now is really good. I mean, it's very rare now that he's sad or about it, but if he is, he talks to me. You know, he talks to me about, like, I'm sad of the day that you move out, and you know, I'll take care of you guys forever. You can stay here even though we're not married. And I said, I really love that. Thank you so much. And I tell him what a wonderful man he is. Like, I communicate so much better with him than I ever did when we were together.
Yeah.
We have not.
That is, Dayna. Why do you think that is?
Because there's only so deep you can go in a relationship when you're not honest.
Yeah.
You really can't. And hello, how big of a lie is that for me to be with somebody who I'm not in love with, you know, and that affects everything. And so there is that wall. I tried to, but because I was with him since I was 17, since I was 15, like, I didn't really know what in love was, you know? So, yeah.
How did you know you weren't in love?
Well, because he was emotionally abusive for a lot of years, and I knew that I was really upset with him for being that way. It was his own upbringing. I know it was his own childhood damage. I totally get it, but I knew I wasn't in love because I didn't have those feelings. I just didn't want to be, you know, in that relationship. I just knew. I knew it long ago, but I kept trying new things. And you know, the interesting thing is, when I learned about the law of attraction like 10 years ago, I think it was on Oprah. Remember when The Secret was huge? It was like right around the time when I came to Australia, like The Secret and like that book, The Secret. Oh, it was a woman from Australia who wrote it, right?
I think she was part of it. Yeah.
So that kind of screwed me, actually, and I'm going to explain why. Because it was wonderful in some ways, but the whole focus of it was to focus on what you liked. And whatever you didn't focus on, and really, really focus on the good parts, what you didn't focus on would go away. So I spent 10 years dealing with like emotional abuse, and him being really upset, which got worse and worse because he had issues that he had to deal with that he's now dealing with. But I would focus on the one little positive thing, like all the time. Like I would just be like, but he's earning money for our family, you know, I love it. And so I would ignore, put it away, anything negative, every day that something like that would happen. But there's only so much you can do that, because that's not very authentic to do long term. I found out. Because those things that you're not focused on are still fucking there. They are like, and I love Law of Attraction. Thank you, Rhonda Byrne, for changing my life, and Oprah for bringing this to my attention. But it really kept me in a relationship much longer than I should have been, where I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And we talk about that. I tell him that we've taught everything. I don't hide anything from him, and that's why we have a better relationship, because I'm completely honest.
Yeah. But that is to me, that is the biggest thing. You couldn't now not be honest with yourself.
Right, exactly. We're the hardest ones to be honest with. And I really had to be honest with that, because I didn't want to face the truth. I hated the idea, because of my idea of divorce too was very conditioned. I didn't know there was a such thing as what we're doing at all. Like I thought divorce was just tearing the kids apart in custody battles, and you're arguing over money, and I'd be a mom, you know, in a tiny apartment on food stamps, struggling and working 5 jobs like in the movies. And I really thought it would be like that. Like, and I thought my kids would suffer. That was my main thing, is that my kids would suffer and they'd be torn between 2 homes. And everything I've done, this is what I said to myself, everything I've done to peacefully parent them would be ruined. All of it. It would all be a waste, because they would be hurting and suffering so much in the only other option I saw, that I stayed, you know, out of fear. So, and I like to think of myself as a fairly, you know, intelligent woman who I've read a lot of books. I went to college, like everything traditionally. I know a lot of things, but I never knew that there was an option or an alternative to my conditioned idea of what divorce or separation would be. So I stayed. And it was what it was, you know. I think that we were great parents together, but it just didn't work out any other way, and that's okay. So I think when children really, really suffer is when there's no one there to talk to them about things. I've read a lot about this recently, actually, because now I'm on a path of trying to help people with honesty and conscious uncoupling and all these things that I've learned. And when parents get a divorce and they don't talk about things, kids can suffer and have damage. But as long as your kids are by your side every step of the way, I mean, we sat on the bed, all of us as a family, me, Joe, and the kids, and hugged each other, like when we told them. And they were crying and asking, it was really tough. And it was just, I'll never forget ever sitting there telling them. And he was crying with his head in his lap, and the kids were all crying. And just like, it was just that was the moment I most feared in my entire life. And I was in the middle of it. But it brought us closer than we had ever been, that experience. As painful as it was, we can't be afraid of our kids experiencing pain. And I tried to do everything I could to avoid them feeling pain, but it only made the pain grow and be much worse. So I still remember that, like, family hug, and we've had several since, just going, and we both say to the kids, we know this is unconventional, but look at us. We've always been unconventional. So it's kind of a funny, we haven't hit the point of
and also to me, you're teaching them to be honest about their own feelings. And as much as I agree, to me, that's the biggest thing. That's always been one of my biggest things, to be honest.
Definitely. And so peaceful parenting does extend to these things, you know, and I don't want parents to think that if they don't have, they might have seen me before. And I've had so many people say, not so much anymore, luckily, but people would say, oh my God, I can't be as perfect as you. I can't, you know, you do everything right. And you're doing the most perfect things. And I can't be like you. I'm divorced, or I'm unhappy, or I don't have this. And that kind of perpetuated this, what I thought I had to uphold for a long time. But, you know, me being vulnerable and sharing honestly, but sharing that this actually, the hardest thing that I ever thought would come in my life is really what has become the greatest gift, and that my kids have learned so much from, and are so resilient and are so open and like communicating in relationships because we have been. So don't be afraid of your feelings and truth, because at the end of the day, all peaceful parenting to me is about truth and honesty and authenticity, and trying to let go of fear and control. So I think you guys just got the longest interview about my separation ever. because I only did one other one. I did one other one when I mentioned it very briefly, but this is the interview. This is the interview that everyone's going to listen to and know what really happened. So, yeah.
I personally feel that's extremely powerful what you just shared, because when I separated with my husband and leading up to having a conversation with the kids, we sought counselling. And one of the things I've done for the majority of my life is to suppress emotion. Now, if the counsellor had have known me better, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have said to me, the best thing to do is to keep emotion out of it. Make sure you come.
Oh, no.
So I was already going to ice cold for the majority of my life. So we had that conversation, and yes, I was ice cold. And it wasn't until years later I spoke with my daughter about it, and she said the most difficult thing she found about our separation was the conversation that day, and there was no emotion.
Wow. That is powerful. That speaks so much, doesn't it? So I love that you said that, because like me crying in the bathroom with the door shut, what is that teaching my kids now? I just cry in front of them, but I don't want them to see me sad still. Like I still have that trigger, but this is who I am. This is what I'm in right now in my life. And the worst thing I can do is hide it or lie about it or make assumptions that things should be a certain way. So you have nothing to lose.
Emotions themselves aren't bad.
Right.
They're not bad. We've grown up being told they're bad things. To be sad's bad, to be angry is bad. I mean, to use it against other people is bad, but to just kind of go out in the bush and scream and yell, and that's not hurting anybody else, that's not that bad. You know?
No,
it's bad at all, actually. So
it's really good, and it really is connected to another important aspect of peaceful parenting, and that's freedom of mind and freedom of emotion. Yes. When we were children, most of us, if we showed anything but joy or contentment, our parents were very inconvenienced. You know, if we showed anger or resentment or frustration, we were either like sent away for those emotions. We were rejected in a sense, most of us as children, for our emotions. So
I did it to my children too. I admit, I was very, I didn't know how to deal with my own children's emotion. As much as I knew I was supposed to be, I would be immensely triggered by my kids' emotions when they were little. Because of that, I want to say that because I want people to know that I've really had to deal with my own stuff and my own upbringing and all the ways I was shut down to be not triggered by my children bringing emotion to me.
Yeah, definitely. And it also triggers in some people, I know it did for me a long time ago, that I was a bad mom somehow because my kids weren't happy. And so a lot of our need to control or our fear that's triggered by our kids' sad emotions is that we're a bad mom. Oh my gosh, my child. And if we can get them to appear happy, then we feel better about ourselves, which is really selfish. And, I think we've all done it at one time or another, and you just have to admit it and recognize it and try not to do that, because especially those of us really pursuing to do the best job we possibly can. I mean, parenting is my life. Nothing comes before my children. Nothing comes before this focus for me. So I really had to work through that too. So it's really, really important that parents know that because most of us as parents were raised a certain way, we're going to be dealing for the rest of our lives with the side effects of that. And we're going to constantly need to grow to be better parents. But as long as we do it out loud and share with our children, I am the best example right now that divorce and separation, what's way worse than that is living inauthentically, living a lie, and modeling that for your children, because they know, and it affects them deeply. And that's what messes them up, is the hypocritical, like living one way and speaking one way, but then doing something else, for example, or them seeing you in pain. Even if you say you're okay, they know. They're so in tune.
And I look at it like the work I've done on myself, but of course I work with other people now, and I've never been back to somebody's inner child and asked them when I asked them what their inner child really wanted, nobody's ever said, not once have I ever heard somebody say, I want unhappy parents.
Right.
Everybody says, I want happy parents. That's all I want is happy parents. And if my parents are happy, I'm happy. And this is, I'm dealing with maybe a 56-year-old person, taking them back to their 5-year-old self And they know instinctually that they just wanted their parents to be happy. Now that even, and I would say even if that means that they have to separate, and if they're happy, right, that's the main thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And maintaining, you don't have to divorce in a messy way. I mean, we just separated very peacefully, and we stayed together physically, you know, in the same house. But it's not as scary as you think. The scariest thing is continuing to live a lie. So yeah, I think that was one of the most empowering things I've done in my life, actually, is sitting there and looking at him and telling him the truth, and not, I want a divorce, like messy, like in the movies. It was just like, this is how I feel, like I'm not in love with you.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, saying those words, seeing his reaction and holding space for that, just like I do with women in labor as a midwife, I hold space for their emotion. I had to I imagined myself a midwife during that time, actually, because I had to allow him to feel what he had to feel without me needing to suppress it, so I felt better. And experience his emotion and be there for it. Like that was really, really important. And yeah, it's kind of addictive when you start being honest. It really is.
I love that.
It's so addictive because the relief that you feel, you know, when you love, the only way to love yourself is to be honest with yourself and speak your truth. So if somebody says they have self-love, if they're living in a way that's out of alignment for that because they're not being authentic and honest, that's not true self-love. The only love is through honesty.
And sometimes honesty does feel bad because you've got to kind of sit with that part of yourself that is the shadow side, or the side that did, you know, and particularly as a child, those conditioned things where you had to do things you didn't want to do and you felt so bad about it.
Right.
You know, sit with that part of yourself, and you know, that can take some. It is better though than not sitting.
Yeah.
Even though it is hard, it is better than not. Honesty is better than no honesty. So
exactly. Definitely. Exactly. So life is filled with tragedy. I mean, it's one of the reasons we're here. You know, we deal with these things. We can't live a life without sadness, tragedy, regret, dread. And I think I tried to really hold all of those emotions back and those feelings back from my children for so long, because I thought it kind of went in alignment with peaceful parenting, that they had the most peaceful childhood. So to me, anything that what I viewed as not peaceful, which was separation, or, you know, living in a certain, like crying or whatever side effect it was, I viewed it as bad because that wasn't my goal. When in fact, I was so wrong. I was so wrong, because the only way to peace is through telling the truth. And I had to face the dishonesty I had lived for a long time. And I don't regret it, because I was who I was, and I had to do what I had to do. But and I really think I was put here to help people. At first I thought just with peaceful parenting, but now as I go along, I'm realizing that I can help people with a lot of different things as a woman. So I really think that we have to accept that life is going to have all these emotions, and it's okay. So our kids know that too, so that they don't get so freaked out when something bad happens or something negative happens. They understand that mom can survive this, dad can survive this. And so I can break up with my boyfriend when I'm not happy. You know, for example, I don't have to say yes to anything that makes me, you know, uncomfortable. And your kids will live what you model. Trust me, they do in every way. My daughter Tiffany, who's 17 now, before I had separated from Joe, she got in a relationship with a really controlling boy. And he was really abusive and awful to her, and I didn't know it. It was going on for a long time online. What a hard pill that was to swallow. That what I modeled for her, that she was living. And wow, that's actually one of the reasons that motivated me to be so truthful. So your kids will do what you said. Now she's like this diva. She's just like, if anybody shows me anything, I don't know, I'm all done. I'm set with you now. Thank you. You know, and so I'm like, wow, like, oh my gosh, it helped her so much for me to do this. Yeah. When I thought it would be the worst thing for my kids, I was so wrong. They all learned so much that's empowered their lives. So yeah, don't be afraid of the truth.
I love it. I love it so much. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Do ladies have any other questions? Anything else?
Oh, we've probably got hundreds, really. I mean, I'd love to talk to you again when you come back from Acapulco. I mean, if you can, it'd be awesome. But yeah.
I'm happy to talk to you anytime you want. It's my pleasure. Great.
Yeah, it's been so good.
We'll
finish it off. I love the message about being honest. I think that's like the underlying thing definitely a part of our message as well. And thanks, so cool.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're so welcome. And I'm just grateful that you guys appreciate that message, because I didn't realize how important it was to everything in my life, but it really, really is important. And I don't think we get in really uncomfortable, awful situations unless we are dishonest, because we tend to say yes to things or get in relationships or commitments or something that we're not ready for, because we haven't gotten in tune with what our real needs are. So as women, we need to come together and share with each other that it's okay that you had a vision of perfection that didn't work out. Because perfection only comes through being honest, and there is no such thing as perfection anyway. But my ideal that I was modeling to people and what I thought I was supposed to do, I'm so glad that I finally realized it didn't look a certain way. All my responsibility is to other humans on this planet is to live honestly and to live out loud and share with them my journey. So I know it's probably not what most people know has happened to me and my family in the last year, but it's been wonderful. It really has. It's crazy to say.
I so appreciate your, this living out loud that you do, Dayna, because it really does help so many people. It helped me so much. I would not be on the path that I'm on if I hadn't, come across you and read your book. And so
I'm so happy to hear that. Oh, well, thank you ladies so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And we can do this anytime you want. You just let me know and I'll be there. I'm just happy to chat and support other people. So
awesome.
Thanks so much, Dayna.
You're welcome. And let me just say, if anybody wants to get to know more of who I am and what I do, you can find me on Facebook, Dayna Martin, Dayna Martin. I have a Facebook group with about 25,000 members that are all living this life or striving to. So if you're looking for a community of support and you don't have one in person, it's a group called Radical Unschooling on Facebook. I also have a website, daynamartin.com, and we have a YouTube channel, The Sparkling Martins. So if anybody, I'm easy to find. So
I'm always referring people to those sites. I've got all these people around me, new homeschoolers, unschoolers. So I've been referring lots of people to that. And awesome. I highly recommend that you check all those sites out.
Cool. Well, all right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. And I appreciate it, ladies. Bye.
Thank you.